All right, guys, it's finally here. The Jim Caviezel, Dennis Quaid, father-son Airsoft Milsim event you've all wanted. Frequency.
Shut up.
I thought you'd like that. Little joke I made. I didn't think out what I was going to say. So.
Well, first off, you're going to explain what the movie Frequency was about, since
The entire
everyone playing this game was not yet born when the movie came out. Which means none of them.
Well, you see, kids, it was based around a ham radio. Oh, you don't know what that is either. Okay, before the internet, I lost all of you.
Maybe we should just talk about the game.
All right, we'll give that a go. So Frequency is a Revolt game. It's under the Revolt umbrella, meaning many of the rules will be the same, but the gameplay will be different in that it is all about map control this time. So if you look at the map that Kelly will put somewhere here. Nah, you're not going to. It's too hard. You're not very good, are you? In each control section, there will be 3 points of interest. There is a control point, an asset checkpoint, and a resupply. In order to use the asset checkpoint or the resupply, you have to control the control point. When you come to a control point, in order to take it over, you will need to switch the broadcast from the other teams to your team. In order to do that, you will either have a switcher that you simply switch back and forth, or you'll have a laptop. You will need to mute their track and unmute yours. Pretty simple, and it will be readily apparent because your team's broadcast will start playing out of the radio that's at that control point. Once you have the control point, that means you control the assets that are at the asset checkpoint, and more importantly, it means you can now use the resupply that is associated with that control point. There will be assets throughout the field. Part of the game beyond map control will also be stealing other teams' assets and having them controlled. There will be randomized checks throughout the night by the admins, so they will go by these asset control points and see who controls that part of the map and what assets you have under control, and you'll get scored accordingly. You also have to control the area in order to get credit for the assets. You're free to move the assets. If you want to pool all of your assets to one location, you can do that, but they will only get scored if they are within one of those designated asset checkpoints. So if you're in the middle of moving them, and they're not in that place when the admin comes by, you do not get any points. Resupply. As you can see on the map, it is intentionally away from the action, so that if you do need to resupply, ideally you should be pulling your squad away from the fight. Again, we are trying to avoid the use of respawns, so that resupply point should mainly be used for a way for your medics to get their bandages back, to bring your squad back to full strength, and then get back into the fight. So again, in order to use the asset checkpoint or the resupply point, you have to control that area of the map by controlling the corresponding control point. If you don't control that control point, you cannot use that resupply station. It'll be pretty obvious because there will be a radio broadcasting at the resupply point. So when you come to it, if it's not playing your team's broadcast, you cannot use that resupply point. Along that same note, if you are in the process of resupplying and the broadcast changes to the other team mid-resupply, you have to vacate that resupply. Okay, so normally when we resupply, you go back to your commander, he tells you to wait a certain period of time, and then he retasks you, puts you back in the fight. Since we have all of these remote resupply points that are not manned by your commander, we are using the broadcast system to tell you when your team is back in the fight. So let's take a scenario where your team is fighting at a certain area and half of your squad gets demolished, your medics are almost out of bandages, your squad leader orders you to fall back to the nearest resupply point. Your entire squad goes back to that resupply point, which you control. You can tell because it's broadcasting your team's broadcast. Your medic gets back his bandages. You're not back in the fight until the broadcast will tell you your team is back in. It's going to be on a delay of a few minutes, so you may resupply and the broadcast will tell you you're back in immediately, or you may have to wait 2 to 3 minutes before it gives you the okay to go back in. If you are hanging out there all by yourself trying to respawn, you are not obeying the rules. Do everything as a squad, including resupply. The medic process goes as follows. You apply the hemostat clamp, apply the reusable bandage, simulate injecting the person with morphine, leave the bandage on, take off the clamps, That player is now back in. The medic will get the bandage back when the entire squad goes back to the resupply, and he gets resupplied with that bandage. For safety purposes, we've changed anti-armor projectiles to a dip-painted Nerf rocket. Basically what everybody else uses. Max velocity of 300 feet per second on those. We will allow both troop transports and assault vehicles. However, the caveat will be on how many of each are submitted. If one team is submitting 5 assault vehicles and the other team has none, we are not going to allow that sort of imbalance. So if you would like to use your vehicle, please submit it early so that we can get it approved and we can determine what the numbers are. Okay, and now burying the unpopular stuff at the end, kind of like a news dump at the end of Friday, we're going to talk about gun safety. With most AEGs, an FPS chrono reading is sufficient for safety. Even though we're measuring FPS, it's actually accounting for joules, the energy behind it. Obviously, if you have a gun with more energy behind it, that's going to inflict more damage. There's more joules of force. And with most AEGs, by chronoing and limiting the FPS, you are also limiting the joules of force, regardless of the weight of BB they put in it. Yes, there is a little bit of joule creep with most AEGs, but not a ton. Now, where that changes is with most gas rifles, specifically HPA rigs. And with those, if you put a heavier BB in, you are going to get a significant joule creep, and that becomes a safety concern. The reason we are banning the use of HPA weapons is because it's hard enough to govern safely using FPS restrictions. We simply can't come up with a feasible way to govern BB weights. You know, we're not going to be out there with a scale measuring BBs. It's just too easy and too tempting to slip a heavier weight BB into a gun, thus making it outperform other people, but also becoming much less safe. And these aren't hypotheticals. It has happened in the past, and safety really is our top concern.